All right, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Barry Smith. Welcome to the Founders Podcast. This is officially the first version of the Founders Podcast. We've actually been working really hard behind the scenes. We have several of these podcasts already recorded. So if you have been one who is waiting on this podcast, you're the one who maybe I interviewed, or you just waiting for it to be published. I really apologize for any delay, but we've been working hard behind the scenes because there's a lot of interconnecting things. First off, if you are here today, I want you to connect with us by texting this number, 855-569-9473. Text that number and just say hello, because that's the way you can keep up and interact with Startempire Wire directly. Second thing, a little bit about Startempire Wire. We are hyper-local. We're all about the startup, the entrepreneur, the founder first. We categorize startups into 6 levels. So if you are a mom and pop shop, or if you are a lifestyle startup photographer, it's okay. All of those things are included, and we'll list out the 6 categories of startups we look at on our website as well. But this podcast, the Founders Podcast, we bring to you all of the best startups, all of the best entrepreneurs here in the Inland Empire, and we're just having one-on-one conversations with them. So we really want to connect with you. If you're interested in coming on the Startempire Wire podcast, you can email us at info@startempirewire, or you can apply from directly going to the application to be on the podcast on the website, the link on the website. Other than that, I just want you to sit back, relax, enjoy the podcast, and I'll talk to you soon. Welcome to the Startempire Wire Founders Podcast, where we make entrepreneurial founders a top priority. Each episode features risk takers, business builders, community shapers, institutional and government supporters in our local startup ecosystem. Tune in weekly to hear all about what's happening with the movers and the shakers of Southern California's Inland Empire and beyond. All right, everybody, this is Barry Smith III, and welcome to the official first Startempire Wire, I guess you would say, interview. Yeah, this is the main segment of our podcast. We got a few other segments that we're working on, like the weekly Wire Roundup, but this is the first one of the interviews, interviewing founders, finding out all of those people who are in the startup community, who are important contributors. I like to call them leaders and feeders, and the entrepreneurs in the startup community are the leaders. That's a reference from the book Startup Community, so check that out. Today we have Marco Magallon, who is the founder of SwoopIn. I'm going to let Marco introduce himself. Go ahead and take away, Marco.
Thank you, Various, for having me on. I appreciate that. We've had several meetings now in person and digitally, and so I've gotten to know a lot about you and understand that I'm speaking to a fellow entrepreneur, and so I have a lot of deep respect for someone that understands building something from nothing and all the hustle that takes. So, and we'll get into my story too and why I sympathize, but I think your story is fascinating too. So, where to begin? Where exactly do you want me to begin?
So I mean, I guess just tell us, a little bit about, like, maybe who are you, Marco, as a person? Like, give us a personal introduction. Like, where'd you grow up?
Sure.
What led you? Kind of like what I just shared before we start this. Maybe not as long. Okay. Maybe a quick 5-minute intro to you.
To the way back machine.
Yeah, a little timeline.
So myself, I'm originally a Cali boy. I was born in Pomona, raised in Corona, then Rancho Cucamonga by 2 parents, first generation Hispanic from Mexico. And growing up in California was a really blessed experience because I got to experience so much diversity from an early age. Diversity in terms of different communities, people from different places. There's a lot of people here that are not originally from here in SoCal. And this place is a cultural magnet for like a little slice of pretty much anywhere else in the world. So I really like growing up with that. But up until when I was 17 and it was time to look at, my higher education, even though I applied to a lot of great schools in California, I saw a great opportunity to go beyond. And I knew that if I'd stayed in California for college as well, that I'd become kind of spoiled by the weather. And I would always kind of be thinking like, well, this was life. But I'm like, certainly it'd be a good idea to go somewhere different and see a different kind of culture, a different kind of speed of life, weather, biome. And college presented that opportunity. So I ended up matriculating at the University of Notre Dame.
Matriculating.
I know, I was like excited to use that word. There's a word of the day. I couldn't have picked a school that was in so many ways more polar opposite than
Nice.
SoCal. I mean, the weather for starters, I remember my freshman year, all the upperclassmen would torment the people from warm states like Florida, Texas, or Cali with the stories of what our first winter would do to us. And the first snow came on my birthday, my freshman year, and yeah, most of the year it's covered in snow. But weather aside, I mean, culturally, Notre Dame is pretty different when you have, it's a religious institution. And you have a lot of people that went to single-sex, small graduating class, private schools, and then all of a sudden they get dropped into what's essentially a small city of mostly other folks like them, but also a lot of folks like me that came from a public school background and weren't raised by really conservative values, which Notre Dame, especially now, is much more diverse in its in just the ideas that live around campus. So, and that's great. Diversity of thought is important for a university. But I definitely got to see a different world view through the friends I became close with, and so I think that was a very useful thing for me because, especially in these politically sensitive days, I feel like I have a wider breadth of perspective, which has been useful. Nice. But the other thing that was interesting about when I went to school was that Facebook had just started becoming a thing. And Facebook had just arrived on campus like a year before I did. And I remember the summer before freshman orientation that I'm like, well, I'm making an account because I want to connect with people at my dorm and just start, introducing myself and basically arrive on campus already knowing some people. Mm-hmm. And I quickly got to see how my college experience actually could have been better if Facebook hadn't existed, because what I got to see was kind of the beginning of tribalism amongst different friend groups, and that it was really hard because so many of like the social activities were organized through the dorms. Like you couldn't really branch out beyond that. People became, very married to their identity of their dorm and the associated group that had on Facebook. So I got to see that, people weren't getting as much as they could out of their college experience because of things like Facebook. So that was interesting to see. But after my undergrad...
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. That just really... I never thought of it that way, how Facebook does divide and create tribes. I never thought that it could be like per dorm. That's crazy.
Well, let me give you another example. All right. Notre Dame was doing much better than it ever had before in terms of like ethnic diversity.
Yeah.
But I felt so much pressure, and the Facebook groups were one of the ways I felt this pressure to just join like the Hispanic groups, student groups on campus. And I said, I don't really want to, because I want to just keep myself open to everything. And what I could see is that, again, these groups became pretty tribal. And you could even see this in the dining hall. There'd be different tables, like, oh, here's the table with all the Hispanics, here's the table with all the Asians, here's the table with, so forth, right?
Yeah.
And so I didn't see Facebook help at all with that. I saw Facebook only make that worse, because it gave people a digital way to silo themselves. So, but it was very necessary to have a presence on Facebook, because I remember otherwise people thought you were kind of a a psycho if you.
Right.
What are you hiding? You don't have any pictures. You don't have a profile. But the other thing that grinded my gears with Facebook was the relationship status. College as this kind of chance to discover who you are as a sexual being. I feel like the relationship status on Facebook really, really put a damper on that, because when you were at a socially conservative school like Notre Dame, a lot of people took the relationship status to be emblematic, like a digital wedding band. And
yeah, that makes sense.
you start seeing someone, and then the question would pop up like, "Oh, sooner we could become Facebook official," and you would, and then all the same people, the same friends you had of that same, opposite gender, they would just stop talking to you, and then you'd break up, and then relationships they would start talking to you again, and like inviting you to lunch, and I was like, well, this is very disingenuous, and also it's college, like. I know there's a lot of pressures to like get married by the time you're coming out of the program, because the idea for someone raised Catholic is that this is going to be where I have the greatest odds of me meeting someone that shares my beliefs, and
right.
And not taking into account that we're very on the young side. We haven't really lived in the real world yet, so make that commitment.
It's really fascinating though. Like, and I think, the studies that will come out in the future to just, I know there are already studies that talk about how social media has like changed our brains, and it's really affected the way we live, the way we experience like being a human nowadays. We're in a completely different dimension of things, like as compared to our grandparents. So one thing I want to kind of like segue into is like, how did your experience with that affect the origin of your startup? Like, how did that affect it? Yeah,
I'm a very, very narrative driven person, and so I haven't even started talking about SwoopIn, right? I mean, I just kind of started telling my story, and I was like, well, here's something interesting to kind of unpack, which is going to be very important later in my life.
Right.
Because throughout my entire undergrad, I still had no idea that I was going to go even into software engineering at all, or much less, make something that you could potentially one day steal market share from Facebook, right? And not to bash entirely on Facebook. Facebook is just the example. It's the name that everyone recognized. But before that, of course, it was MySpace. And, people of a certain age and beyond know all too well what MySpace was. And really a lot of the same elements were present there. But for me, being in the ecosystem of the university and seeing how these network effects, network technologies were playing out was fascinating, because it did plant a seed for wanting things to be different and thinking, why can't they be different? Why do they have to be like this? Because this just doesn't seem... It seems like we should hope for more, and something that would actually enable genuine new human connections. So after my undergrad, which was in pre-medicine and business, I had a foundation in business and how to think through an idea and break it up into the pieces that were all very important to making a company to produce something that could change the world. And I became more excited about the business side than I was the medical side, because I realized the world is in so many ways very sick, just the same way that a person can get sick with illness. And how many people are out there, with genuine intentions trying to cure these social ills? And like, if I'm seeing problems that other people aren't, at the time even talking about yet, then that's probably what I should go and do, and, let other people be doctors. Although funny enough, once I got into startups later, my mom would be like, what you're doing sounds exciting, very interesting, but like a lot of work, really challenging. Why don't you just go to med school? I'm like, as if med school isn't challenging. Of course med school is challenging, but of course,
mama always concerned.
Yeah. Wanting your son, to quit being a useless entrepreneur, right? It's been a long road, but as things have built up, she has understood more and more what I'm doing, and she sees other people believe in it, and that obviously helps her get off.
I mean, I can relate to that, because I told you a little bit of my story. that period where I was laid off and like looking, deciding whether or not I was going to go back, and my mom was always like, yeah, you need to go get a job. Okay. Anyway,
we treaded exactly the same ground, because when I finished my undergrad, I was taking the MCATs, I was aiming at med school, but then I heard about this program also at Notre Dame, which was kind of a new program, something, it was borrowing some concepts from a STEM/business program at Stanford University. And so they were adapting it to Notre Dame, and really it was like an MBA for people with a STEM background. And I said, this program is just a 1-year commitment. And for me, it sounded really cool to have the opportunity to kind of bridge the two halves of my undergrad, because I had like a hybrid major, right? Pre-med and business. And I was like, really bring them together, pick something technology oriented and really focus on the business commercialization of it. And so I did the 1-year master's program, which is called the Engineering and Science Technology Master's program. And they called it STEAM, which sounded like a self-help group.
Yeah, right.
but it was basically like a science-focused MBA. And that was such a great program for helping me reinforce the business foundations. It was very empowering. And I also formed a really close relationship with some classmates they would have startup weekends where
I love those. Oh, those are awesome.
And Notre Dame provided Chipotle, pizza, alcohol, soda, and it was amazing. So I enjoyed those. And out of one of those, the idea was birthed for a nonprofit consulting group.
Nice.
And even Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who later ran for president, he gave a really nice endorsement letter and connected us with a lot of leaders in the community of South Bend, Indiana, to get this nonprofit consulting platform started with a lot of different stakeholders in the city. We had wealthy investors, people who own data centers, people who ran the regional hospitals, people in the school system. And then we also got the public transportation agency on board, Transpo. So I actually became the client lead for the public transportation. And that's where another seed was planted, which is the seed of knowing what technology can do to drastically transform our society in terms of location-sensitive technologies. So I was working on, for example, looking at different solutions for fleet management, for tracking the bus systems live and in real time. And for me, that was so exciting because it was kind of like a video game for real life, like a real-time strategy game, like Command and Conquer. And you have your buses, you're tracking them on this satellite view, and then you're literally clicking around the map and you're creating alerts, you're creating waypoints. And I thought that was fascinating. So that was another seed for SwoopIn. Yes. When I finished my 1-year commitment to this startup, I was like, I really need to go somewhere else and not just be stuck here in the Midwest. I was always kind of like a pick up and move, and now get myself in an unfamiliar setting again. I really, I thrived in chaos, I guess you could say. And so after finishing that in 2013. I was really left off the rails in terms of like, well, what do I do with my life now? I did this consulting startup. I don't want to continue to do more consulting. Like, my colleagues, they pretty much all continued either with the same program or went to different consulting groups.
Right.
And I said, I want to take some time to travel. I want to kind of have like a couple months sabbatical. So I went to Brazil in the meantime. And when I came back to California, thinking like, all right, we've had some fun. Now it's time to think about what we're going to actually do with our life and focus on for a couple of years next.
The Inland Empire startup ecosystem industry is tremendously fragmented. A few top-tier hubs, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego, are well covered by media, events, and data platforms. Finding reliable information relevant to startups or the tech industry in the Inland Empire is extremely difficult. As a result, startups can't scale fast enough. Investors are having a hard time finding the right deals, and corporates can't find the right companies to partner with for their innovation activities. Startempire Wire, the leading Inland Empire startup publication, is providing the Inland Empire startup ecosystem with the most accurate, engaging business and financial data, events, and news. Our reach of entrepreneurs, C-level executives, angels, VC investors, startup employees, key management at innovative corporates, and big tech is the solution for your B2B or B2C needs. As we build out our platform, we're looking for partners. This is your opportunity to get in on the ground level. If you're looking to align yourself with the local and growing startup and tech ecosystem of the Inland Empire, we have created the platform to get your name noticed and the opportunity for you to grow the recognition of your brand. Contact us today for availability and pricing options. We look forward to our partnership with you.
I was playing Grand Theft Auto 5 because that came out while I was in Brazil.
Yeah.
And in playing that game, I'm like, how am I so engaged by this video game? I'd been a gamer, before. Now with the same time that I had at that point in time, no job, no continuing school. Yeah. And I was like, I'm just going to read the books and play the video games I haven't had time for a long time.
Yes.
And my mom is going to ask me how many jobs I applied for on a daily basis, and I'll apply some here and there. But really, I just kind of my curiosity was so driven by, man, how far video games come. And in playing Grand Theft Auto 5, I was like, this is it. You've got a fully virtually realized digital environment. I've got my avatar running around, completing these story quests. But as a player, I feel so engaged with this story, even more than I do with real life. Why is that? And then one day, my mom tells me, why don't you make yourself useful? We have a lot of recycling bottles and cans in the house. Go and sell them, and have some money to put in your pocket. And I said, what if I had an app that had a map, and I could drop a pin on the map, creating this kind of quest that people in the area could see, and then it's a mission for them to do, and they come pick up the recycling, go take care of that chore for me. And then I was like, what if there's other chores that these people could do for me? So I was thinking, around on demand, help with tasks. But then I thought there's a social element here, because you're getting neighbors in a community to interface with each other. And so you're getting connections to form, and you're getting people to do things and get out of the house and go to new places, meet new people, do new things, yada yada.
That completely segues right into the next question. You're right there. So SwoopIn, inspired by Grand Theft Auto 5 and real life tasks. So tell us a little bit in depth, what is the needs that SwoopIn is meeting, and this virtual way to interact with people. Tell us about it, and are there any others who are out there doing something similar to this?
The need is one of the most universal human needs, and probably a need that other organisms behind humans share as well. Need is situational awareness. And that sounds like a very technical, tactical, almost military term, but it's actually a very broad term of, you need to know what's happening around you. You need to know the context for, in relation to where you are in the world, where different things are. And we have been lacking that context for so long, because the context isn't just knowing where businesses are located. It isn't just knowing, where your friends are. It's a bit of all those elements, but it's also the element of knowing what's happening at a particular place at a particular time. So it's event driven. And this is a need that goes back to our prehistoric origins. And really explains why SwoopIn as an interface really works and is different to so many things out there. Because before humans even had a language, they were communicating these location-based opportunities and threats on maps. Except these maps were painted by hand, using like the blood of an animal or juice from a plant or a fruit on a cave wall on rock, right? But this existed even before language. And you could go into Google or watch a National Geographic show and just how old these are,
Right.
and eventually led the way to hieroglyphs. But humans have been making maps to communicate for such a long time, and in the world that we live in today, where we've long since left small villages and now we live in huge societies, very dense societies, the needs are constantly changing around us in real time.
Yeah.
But how do you communicate them? Well, other apps that do something similar to SwoopIn, they tend to focus on a particular slice, and to really do that well, but the opportunities for synergy that I envisioned from the start with SwoopIn, they're not there yet. Because take Uber, for example. That's one app we'll talk about. Uber focuses on the slice of ride sharing. And what's funny is when I first had the idea for SwoopIn, I didn't even know about Uber at the time. That's how long I've been on this journey.
That's awesome.
And I thought ride sharing is a really useful application, finding people to carpool with, and etc. But Uber is really focused on that, and they've transformed how we think of taxis. And I'm very intimately familiar with Uber from both sides, both as a rider and as a driver, because I knew that I had to try being a driver. I had to learn this technology and see how can this transform the future of jobs. How does this change the way I looked at my neighborhoods and the greater region and strangers, right? It really transformed the concept I have of all those things. And now let's go to another location-based platform example. Let's talk about Tinder.
Oh yeah.
Tinder, I remember around the time it first came out, maybe a year or two into it, I'd already had the idea for SwoopIn again, and I said, well, what are other examples of location-based platforms where strangers are meeting up strangers? And Tinder came up, and I said, well, yeah, of course, that makes sense. It's dating. Dating is where people, of course, they keep their guard up because it's strangers, but at the same time, you're very open to meeting with strangers because you don't necessarily, a lot of people don't necessarily want to just date within their friend group. And so that's where you need to intelligently connect with strangers, right? And then make not strangers as the mutual interest progresses. So I got on Tinder, and I got on it during its
haven't we all got on Tinder?
Well, I had a work excuse.
Okay.
I was on there for research purposes. And, I mean, of course, I do believe
research.
Love what you do. And so when I say the heyday, I mean really the heyday. Like Tinder today isn't what Tinder was.
Right. No.
4 or 5 years ago. Which is kind of sad because you see other apps every day coming up trying to pick up that mantle, and it's just like, why can't it just be Tinder still? And but humans are complicated, and they tend to complicate the things that they get on. So I mean, it's perhaps a natural progression. But yes, I put forth Tinder as another example of a location-based social application, of course.
Yes.
And of course there's others. I found out about Nextdoor, which is essentially micro Facebook for neighborhood communities. I found out about Meetup. Meetup's a huge one, especially in LA still, right?
Yeah.
And so Meetup is one I'll talk a little bit more at length of, and then start drawing comparisons because, they're very established, at least in certain regions like big cities, and definitely LA I think is one of the big bastions for Meetup.
Yes.
There's meetups for all sorts of things, business networking, more specifically like tech business networking as well. There's meetups for hiking. I've been on a ton of those. Meetups for dating, meetups for foodies, meetups, for drinkers.
The great thing about Meetup, and I'll just throw this in there. The great thing about Meetup is like you can meet people who are, like you don't know them, and excuse me, yeah, you don't know them. You just like encounter different people, and so like I'm in like just recreational groups. We every now and then, like if I want to get out and meet new people, I'm gonna go to this recreational group. We're going to grab sushi together. It's just a group of people in their 20s and 30s, which I'm like in the later the later edge of 30s. But yeah, it's really amazing.
Yeah. No, it is, and it provides something accessible for people to get out and build a community, which gets really hard once you get out of college. To meet strangers that are for no specific purpose, right? Because the problem with, for example, dating apps is people get on there with very specific intentions, and sometimes those intentions don't match up, right? Some people really are there just to make friends. And that's totally valid, and that's also sometimes, my perspective, and it's most of the time. And because I think that's like the foundation for any kind of relationship, whether for business or, intimate. Like I think friendship needs to be that common foundation to all of them. And so Meetup is great because you do get to grow those around a common interest. But the thing about Meetup is that it's a web-first application that got founded in the early 2000s, so it's like about 20 years old at this point. And even on mobile, you could tell it's not built for mobile. And
it's not.
It's been needing a ground-up rethinking. Also, the business model where the managers of a group have to pay the subscription, like they kind of chose the most straightforward route to monetization, and I think it's one that creates difficult barriers that wouldn't be there if they had a different interface that allowed different kinds of monetization.
Yeah, I think if they, the monetization on Meetup, and after this we'll get to the next question, but the monetization on Meetup it makes it yeah, like you said, it makes it hard if they did it like per person or ticketed, monetization. I don't know. It'd be interesting.
Yeah, but Meetup is a great platform for today. It's just it shows difficulty scaling into the future, and we with SwoopIn, we are perhaps taking a lot of the same like target market space, but it's with a very different interface, built for mobile first, in a very different business model where we're actually software as a service for the businesses and the large event organizers that want to have channels and certain kinds of additional functionality to what a user gets on the SwoopIn app. And one important thing is that on SwoopIn, you don't have to first join a group in order to start seeing things that you can go and do. We're
that's
more
cool.
and spontaneous, where your community is changing on the fly based on where you are and when you're there. So it's more dynamic.
I love that.
Meetup is a way towards it, but it's really, we're much more dynamic.
Yeah.
But Meetup is the established power, and that's actually funny. I went to Tinder meetups for while they had them a while back, and it was at the Tinder headquarters.
Yeah, those were real popular.
Meet with engineers actually for Tinder and learn about how they tackle certain scaling problems for their platform for millions of users. Problems we are aiming to certainly have one day.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they stopped doing those, and the group was large. The group is large, like 750 people. And then Meetup started sending me emails like, this group's going to get shut down. They haven't had any events, now maintain the subscription. And do you want to take over it? You could rebrand it. And
did you take over that group? Did you take over that group?
Yeah, you're looking at the
Awesome. We gotta connect,
right?
We gotta connect on that little one of these days. I gotta chat with you about that.
Get in the group. Get in the Meetup group.
All right. Okay. So next question. All right. So the growth of your startup. Tell us about the growth. From the beginning till this point. Like what's been some of those pains, like the growing pains that you experienced and you had to overcome to this point.
Tremendous question. Full of so many worms in this can, open a can of worms. But so after I had the vision, had the idea, I knew it was going to be tough to figure out exactly where to start, what the next one step was going to be. So what I did is I packed up my bags and I said, I'm going to leave California, go to Notre Dame. And I was thinking at first it was going to be, maybe a week or two. And I'm going to meet with my mentors there because I had an outline of the business at that point. I had some mock-ups of screenshots for the interface. And I was like, I really want to meet with them and have them tell me, do they think this has legs? And then what they recommended as far as next steps and so on. Because I was thinking, it could be connections to sources of capital to get money together and then get developers together and build the damn thing.
Yeah.
And the feedback that I got from, again, mentors who I really trusted, had been my teachers, who had been mentors for the first startup I did, and leaders in the community, was you really should learn how to build the MVP first, because it's going to teach you some of the skills that you will need to evaluate who your co-founding team is going to be.
Ooh.
It's also going to allow you to really gauge and create metrics around market potential. And that's going to help you, when the time is right, raise capital.
Yes.
So I followed that advice, and since my ticket to South Bend had been one way, I actually ended up now returning to California for 2.5 years. Over those 2.5 years, I taught myself software engineering, and I learned YouTube was my classroom, Stack Overflow was my office hours.
I love it.
And, yeah. And then I also I got connected to some early capital, like small amounts of money that would basically just cover personal expenses, and some like business development expenses, like have an event here and there to do an MVP. I got connected with a lot of people at the University of Notre Dame, the law school, had a clinic. It still has a clinic where students interested in IP and corporate law can help small businesses with their legal needs, trademark filing, and so forth. So I got
that is so cool.
SwoopIn. I got the logo for SwoopIn. I had a lot of good relationships at the university, since I came from a master's program that was in technology commercialization. That's actually how I tapped into the student body. Was they were looking for real world projects to assign teams of students on, grad students, to do things like customer validation, MVP, and business model generation. So I said, well, SwoopIn it's a broad concept. Help me narrow it down, help me gauge some of the interest. And so that's how I got some students involved. And then when the school year was formally in swing, because this was a summer program, they're like, we want to stay involved. And we also want to get some of the other students that we know on campus, some undergrads, for example. We want to get them involved too, because we think that this has a lot of exciting applications within our own college environment. And I said, well, that sounds awesome. And, I'm happy to be a mentor and also be mentored, by people that were actually taking classes in computer engineering, like, formal classes, people, studying graphic design. So it was really a two-way mentorship street. And for me, I was able to more quickly get to an MVP. And for them, it was a chance to, very early on in their academic career, start using the skills they were learning in the classroom. And pretty much all of the students I worked with got amazing jobs out of graduation. I certainly was in no position yet to hire them.
Yeah.
We were still figuring out a lot of the basics of SwoopIn, and what I began to see was Notre Dame, while a great place to run some experiments, it wasn't really a place to scale, because it's small on the side of universities that people recognize, and also the surrounding community is also small, low density. And being from California, close to LA, I'm like, LA was always really exciting to go back home, because I miss home.
Yeah.
And also because I'm like, there's a whole food truck scene, there's a festival scene, there's a real famous nightclub entertainment industry scene.
Oh, big.
LA really, I felt was the place to be doing things on a new scale and really figure out how to build a platform to scale to the
Yeah,
greatest heights, because that's been a big challenge for SwoopIn. Is it's such a broad application that where exactly do you start, right?
yeah,
And I've been building it to be universal. The same way that people look at an app like Google Maps as universal, I actually look at SwoopIn as even more universal, because
mm,
now it's not just for navigation, right?
yeah,
It's really for planning out your day, filling up the blank spots on your calendar.
yeah.
So it's a very broad day-to-day need,
Okay.
and so that starts to get into some of the challenges. Of course, having no capital, I had to do other jobs along the way to sustain myself. So I chose jobs that were going to ultimately help the SwoopIn mission, right? So I built apps for other people. I was a freelance app developer.
Nice.
I knew both iOS and Android development, and that was paying good money, helping people essentially as a one-man software development firm, because
Yes.
I could advise on all aspects of the concept and then actually build out the app too natively.
Yes. Right.
And that was helping me tremendously, because as I started to formally recruit people later on, once I came back to Southern California, I was able to really be very specific in how I managed, and also lead by example by not being someone afraid or unable to roll up my sleeves and get in there and write code, get in there and fix a bug that was there.
Okay. Let me put this, like, this little abbreviation, or I guess just add this point to what you're saying, because I can relate to you on that level. If you're gonna manage somebody, you need to at least know a little bit about what they're doing. And if you, like me, I'm a web developer. I can hire web developers very easily because I understand the code, and so that is the truth, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
You can craft expectations as to how long it's going to take. You could, of course, provide suggestions, and sometimes that's useful, just a different perspective when you're coding.
yeah.
And with features too, what I found has really helped is that when I'm thinking of features, I can be realistic and I can MVP specific features. And this is part of why SwoopIt is an app that does so many things while still feeling very user friendly. It's because I was able to really map out the feature with enough specificity that for the
Yeah.
developer it was straightforward what the
Right.
implementation plan was. And the design was something that I was able to really think through, really chew through the bone, and talk about with other people
Yeah.
to figure out, well, what is the way that this feature becomes a scalable universal feature that can improve SwoopIn across all our verticals. The thing that's really powerful about SwoopIn is we haven't built it for any one specific vertical. It's
That's
also a bit of the curse, because people these days, they're used to specialized apps. They're used to very clear, directed, marketing messages, and we're marketing something broad.
right.
And so with that, it's also it's kind of hard to get a niche excited when you're like, well, we're not an app just for
To me,
I-
it
go
to me
ahead.
it sounds like you're on the road to becoming a platform. Like
It
that's
is,
that's what
absolutely.
it sounds like, because Facebook was not a platform initially, and then they built in the APIs and they built that layer to make it a platform where other people could build apps on top of it.
You're exactly right, and
And
that's
so
actually one of the big challenges with Facebook. And I got to see how this happened over time. Is
yeah,
that Facebook went from being something simple to being something so complex that it's had so many issues in terms of, like, I'll talk about privacy, for example. Privacy is a huge one. Everybody, almost
yep,
everybody, has an issue with Facebook with how it's handled privacy, and I don't think that necessarily just comes from them, being greedy and wanting to sell people's data. I think a lot of that comes from how the platform, the user interface is scaled, and the fact that if you go into Facebook settings or even Instagram settings today, you see that these things have gotten so complex, and these features have so much redundancy and aren't really categorized well, and that you see that for a human user, it's tough to know what these things do because so much has been tacked onto them over time. And
yeah,
you see that happening with Instagram now too, especially as Facebook tries to bring itself closer to Instagram and have more integrations, it confuses a lot of people, and you see that, well, Instagram is one day gonna have a reset where perhaps a competitor, most likely a competitor, is gonna come across and do it pretty much exactly what Instagram does, but they're gonna start from a simpler, cleaner template that's also gonna have new technologies built in, new bells and whistles that are just going to be just scaled better, because Instagram already has a massive scaling problem. Like, it's not,
Instagram was never meant to be like a smorgasbord of things either.
Exactly.
Facebook has like morphed it into something that it originally, what drew people to the platform was, the ability to, take those photos, make them look really professional and display themselves, and now they're trying to put TikTok into Instagram.
Oh yeah, I thought they already did. But the funny thing too, it's very relevant to bring up here. It's that as these platforms become bloated, they become harder to maintain. For the user, it becomes more difficult to customize it, especially when it comes to security, privacy preferences. And also, for the market, I think it becomes harder to understand, well, what is the most specialized, what is the efficient purpose of a platform like Instagram or Facebook, or even Google has this problem where kind of like its core competencies get buried under so many features. And me as a startup, I'll tell you, very early on, I was like, why are you doing this? I mean, there's Facebook events, so why do we need SwoopIn? Like, and sometimes they meant well, like they're wanting me to defend my position. I'm like, well, it's a great question. It's a very fair question. Facebook does have events. And I'd have to get into, well, Facebook may have events and may have a lot of other things under the sun. But the thing about Facebook events, the big difference would be that you're really planning things more longer term. It's not spontaneous. If you don't have a network to propagate this event with, like an established group, who's going to see it, and all these issues, right? And I'm like, Facebook is great at what it does, but when it comes to events, and more specifically, the micro events and on-demand activities I was designing SwoopIn for, I'm like, you're really making a horse swim if you thrust Facebook into that arena. And I always said, there could come a time where Facebook could try and copy what we're doing, just as they've copied Snapchat and so many others. But the thing is that because it's Facebook, even if they do exactly what I'm doing, it will inherently be different because it's Facebook.
Yeah. What if they try to buy you out? What are you going to do?
And that's again another scenario that gets raised. Well, I think, you look at every deal when you get it, and whether you take the deal or not, being offered a buyout, I mean, that's a great thing. I mean, that's certainly a milestone, right? But and this segues into the broad vision for SwoopIn, 5-10 years from now, which is,
well, before we get there, tell us about your current needs, because then we're going to go over to that as well. So yeah, tell us about, what are your current needs for SwoopIn, like right now in this stage?
Okay, well, right now we're at a great stage where if you're an iPhone user, you need to download the app and you need to download the app and start using it on iOS. We're pretty well featured. We're also, if you're in SoCal, we're curating a lot of great stuff from other platforms like Eventbrite, Meetup, and Facebook. Just curating, and so that every day, we have 10 or more things in an area that you can drive to or Uber to. Nice. That are just cool things that are happening, to get people out of the house safely to a public venue where there's perhaps some really good deal being offered, like a really awesome happy hour, there's live music or a free show, or free business networking, or anything like that, right? So I'd say iOS users, especially in SoCal, download the app. If you're not in SoCal and you're curious, of course, download the app anyways. SwoopIn works anywhere in the world. except maybe China. I haven't tested it in China. And I know they have a lot of restrictions there, but it works most 90% of the world, and you can start using it with your friends or your clubs or other organizations. So users, because users will help us test. Users will help. They can certainly recommend features. I love it when someone recommends a feature, even if it's something I've already heard before. Having the same idea recommended over and over again is awesome for letting you know what to prioritize.
You know what everybody wants.
Yeah, and also it's people to help also find cool things going on, put them on the map, because hey, maybe it's something I want to go to, right? I'm always if I got some free time, choosing to get out of the house to go do something. And then the second need, very quickly talk about capital, but that's almost any startup can think of a need or a use for capital. We can think of a million uses for capital. We are bootstrapped, even though we've had small investors in the past. That money's long been applied and value was generated, but we are now especially looking at larger fundraisers. But even folks with small amounts, seeing enough interest there could motivate us to start a crowdfunding campaign, for example.
Can I ask you, have you guys received any seed funding?
No, we're in the pre-seed stage, and that's actually what right now we're doing the corporate audit, internal corporate audit to really, figure out what needs to change in the organization to be able to do a very new kind of investment round than any we have had thus far, because the amounts that have been fundraised have been small amounts over a long stretch of time, and now that we have a team and we have so much potential and things that we are almost ready to execute on, we want to have the capital lined up, and it's going to be serious capital. So at the pre-seed round, it's we're talking $500,000 for the pre-seed round, and that round being structured to springboard us into the proper seed round, where it's a multi-million-dollar raise, perhaps $3 million and above, and that gives you your 2-year runway to have a full-time team, have a significant marketing budget, and really blow things up, right?
Yeah.
Especially today, marketing messaging, it all costs money. Marketing has been monetized to hell and back. So.
Absolutely. And while we're talking about capitalization or capital and fundraising and all that great stuff, the Riverside Angel Summit, did you apply or no?
Oh, it did apply. And regardless of what happens, whether we're the right fit or at the right stage or not, because the term angel, I've seen how the term angel has changed over time. Now it's very synonymous with VC, but there are still a lot of folks with capital out there who don't know what to do with it, who maybe for lack of a better idea are just putting it into Dogecoin. And it's just like, well, let's get in front of those people so they can see that we have something serious, that we're super serious about it, and that we're at a very critical stage where things could really explode. So I definitely applied. Scott was very welcoming to apply there, because even if we don't get anywhere in the formal round, you're still getting in front of people. You're seeing where your materials can be improved, and who knows, there could be some kind of like sideline deal that happens, right? Because you're just getting in front of high net worth individuals. So it's absolutely worth my time to be on the lookout for opportunities like that and apply.
Yeah, and that's a goal, like literally here on Startempire Wire. We're trying to get the word out about startups like you to, get in front of maybe a bigger network, and so,
Absolutely, and this is where I see tremendous value in this, where even if Startempire Wire is new, it's like I get the honor of being the first podcast, and that's super exciting, because
that's true.
That, like, for posterity, like, people will be looking back on this, right, as you build your brand. So I'm excited to be a part of that.
They say the internet is forever.
Yeah.
That's the whole saying.
Which is why I'm like, let's see how this first podcast goes, because I haven't done one, and well, let's see so far.
So all right, so let's move to
third need.
Oh, go ahead.
Third need. Beyond just users, I'm looking to connect with community stakeholders, people who have communities of potential users who have an audience, and that they want to augment the way that they engage with them, because we can provide that real-time, real-life aspect to their
Yes.
community. So this can be anything from festival organizers, people in very active chambers of commerce, people
Mm.
with very active, student organizations or clubs at universities, and so on. And you can think of many other examples. These
'Cause-
communities are very important for me to get connected with,
okay.
because they help. They could be potential seeds for the platform, and
Would that be like user basis as well, like possible?
absolutely,
Yeah.
content basis and user basis.
Okay. Okay.
Because the way I look at community is, if you look at SoCal, you can break it up into several concentric circles. My CMO likes to use this term, concentric circles.
Okay.
Take any geographical area, say for example Westwood.
Uh-huh.
That area doesn't just have one community. It's not just the UCLA community. That's
Right.
perhaps the biggest, most well-defined one. But then you've got the surrounding Westwood, like that has a chamber of commerce, for example.
Yes.
And then you have it, well, it's part of the greater LA concentric circle.
Right.
So that's how I look at communities, and any one of those layers is important to talk to, and the sooner the better. So
Okay.
they become real partners in how this platform, this community of communities, takes shape.
I love it, man. And I see the value of where, this will augment community, to allow it to grow, give you that more interaction. Yeah, that's, I just can't wait till you get on the Android, man.
And it's a top priority. I'm directly, personally involved. I have an Android lead.
Yes.
We made the tough decision a few months ago. It wasn't so tough when you figured out that inevitably we were going to want to rebuild what we had. Because believe it or not, Android was actually the first version of SwoopIn we had. But then iOS became the priority, mostly because of the specific markets we were looking at, like Notre Dame being 90%,
iPhone.
iOS.
Yeah.
And for a lot of the time, pretty much when I was transitioning from South Bend, Indiana to Southern California, I was a one-man show. And so I was like, I'm realistically going to be able to keep up with one platform. So
yeah, that's valuable.
iOS, because it was further along based on the work at Notre Dame, and it was a great model, right? But
Yes.
Android is extremely important, because for the world at large, Android is the majority.
Yes.
There's a lot of great manufacturers making great devices, so it's only gaining
Right.
more market share, and so it's important for me too that with Android, we not only meet the goals set by iOS, which is a moving target, because of course we continue to improve iOS, but that we exceed that, because we get to start with like a fresh, zero technical debt platform. That's
Mm.
and then we get to take lessons learned from iOS and more quickly redevelop them in our ideal way in Android.
It's always good to start without technical debt, because that takes time to get over.
Well, we spent the pandemic provided a very strategic opportunity to actually redo our entire backend.
Oh wow.
Redo from scratch our entire API. And so that was many months of work by our CTO, but it was work that needed to be done so that we could sleep at night. And
That's great. No, that's awesome. And so let's move into that final question. I'm going to combine these two questions, but what are your immediate short-term goals? And then, what are you focused on for that? And then 3, 5, and 10 years. What are those goals? So immediate, 3, 5, and 10.
Great. And now talking about the future, it's been a lot of history up to this point, but now getting into the future, the most immediate goal, obviously, get Android done. My brother uses Android. My dad uses Android. We need Android yesterday, and let me tell you where Android's at. Like, we got the map working, we got the user authentication, creation, we got really like the hard stuff done. Yeah. And I know this may not sound like the hard stuff, because there's obviously all the UI UX work done. I mean, to do still, but the thing is, like, getting that first network call, to work, getting that first notification to send, that's always hard.
Yeah.
And once you kind of have like the main trunks of the application done, and you've reached kind of like what the central in our case, the map screen is like the central screen, the home screen.
Mhm.
Once you're there, everything else that remains to be done on the app, it's like a branch, right? Like it branches out.
Yeah.
So at this point, we can really effectively divide and conquer, and that's an exciting place to be getting close to, because then we can be really quick about getting Android out the door onto the Google Play Store.
Are you projecting any date?
Right now, I'd say it's in a month and a half to 2 month range. So
we won't hold you to it. We won't hold you to it too much.
It's good to have a goal, and we really are aiming at the holiday season being like a great teeing off point.
Okay.
For a lot of things, because there's a lot of things that we don't want to do when we're just on iPhone.
Right.
Because we really want to, as we do it, we want to be able to take full advantage of potential network effects.
Yes.
And that's when we really want to do really big, broad market messaging and a lot of crazy ideas that we have for marketing. I mean, SwoopIn, with its vast array of applications, there's so many ways to growth hack this.
Yeah.
We're very excited. So Android getting ready is a huge priority for that. And then we
wait, did you say a huge party?
A huge priority, but to be able to throw the huge party.
We're gonna need to throw a lunch party.
Because the thing is, we're gonna have to throw thousands, millions of launch parties, right?
There you go.
The way I envision launch for SwoopIn is it's gonna be like starting the engine on an old car, right? Like you gotta sometimes turn the crank several times.
Yeah.
It really ignites and it catches, and then your engine's on. That's how I see launching SwoopIn, as like starting like a series of explosions, virality events, and I'm talking the good kind of explosion, the good kind of virality.
The good kind, yeah.
You have to caveat that these days, right?
I know.
But the reason why, it's because I look at what we do as far as launching as really a model, as an example for something that is ready-made out of the box, people can just pick up and do so many things with.
Yeah.
So it's like uploading a new kind of program up to the human server, our collective intelligence. So organizing parties under our brand, that is a big part of it, because that can generate the word of mouth buzz across established social media platforms, because we're about getting people out. We're about making things happen. We're about empowering everyone to be an event organizer, even if you're just trying to plan a lunch together with your friends, right?
Yeah.
So getting these things right is it's important.
Right.
I think launching is going to help with that, figuring out things as well on the fly that we didn't even know.
Right.
Now, getting into
3 years.
3 years. So 3 years from now, I see us funded, seed or post seed. Could be the first Series A. Probably, realistically, I think that's definitely a good goal. So I see us already having the existing team plus some additional heads on board full time, some significant marketing budget to do some damage with. Yes. I see it with a very good working model in LA, showing SwoopIn vision in action, and a model beginning to be applied at other major cities around the US and even internationally.
Okay.
And I see us already a story, and already people being clear that this is the next big thing, because it is a paradigm shift. It is a new way of looking at the internet and what it can do for humans. It's the human API.
I want you to get into that a little bit, just a little bit, okay?
Sure, just a little bit. The internet, as it was created, by folks in the 50s, 60s, started as the government DARPA project, but it was people at universities like Berkeley, MIT, and others figuring out things like, packet routing, networking. They had so much vision for the potential of the internet. I don't think they expected us, for the most part, to get stuck in a rut like we are today, with political polarization, invasion of privacy, and all these other problems that we see with the internet today. I see what we're doing with SwoopIn as a course correction in really going back to what is the point of the internet. It is to augment humans. And this gets into a lot of why computers were created too, right? But really the point here is to augment humans, and SwoopIn brings to bear location-based technologies, smartphone technologies, satellite technologies in a way that empowers the human at the center of it. That's really the big difference between us and other startups that are in a similar space, and certainly the established giants when it comes to tech. And this gets into
what makes it so much different in augmenting the human? Are you saying it augments the human or the human experience?
Both.
Because,
because augmenting the human creates the human experience.
True.
And if you augment the human, you are creating more human experience.
Right.
Because you're not taking away what makes them human. You're not giving in some poor substitute. I feel like today in the world, we have a lot of substitutes for reality, substitutes for the human experience. You've got video games.
Yeah, that's true.
You've got social media. You've got streaming your entertainment through your shows and movies. And I feel like with so much of that, especially as we've been inundated through the pandemic, people will forget what base reality is. I'm maybe starting to sound a little bit like Elon Musk here. We're engaging with simulations within simulations. We need to come back to reality because it's going to change if we can better interface with the people that actually share our reality, with our neighbors, with the people that live in our city that we don't even know, but that we should know, right? That synchronicity is trying to bring us together. If we can better interface, I feel like humanity collectively is this computer that's waiting for its potential to be unlocked. And, you know, people talk about the singularity and they talk about artificial intelligence and they get real excited about that. And I say something else is going to happen before that. And we may be the trigger to it. And that is singularity is a very human singularity where humans kind of realize that the better that we interface with those around us, the sooner we will unlock our own potential and each other's potential. And that drastic problems facing us in the world today, politically, economically, ecologically, they will transform before our eyes if we change the way that we look at the building blocks of our society, which is the individual. And if we can change the way that we network graph with each other, we will realize the true power that we have at scale. We cannot change the building block of a society and not have completely made the highest level of society unrecognizable. And that will transform how we solve these seemingly impossible large apocalyptic problems in front of us.
Well, I think we can go really deep into what you're talking about, because like I have a lot of other like questions and ideas that I can throw into this, but I definitely don't want to like have our listeners going on too long, because
I think
like augmentation and reality, I'm going to say augmented reality is something that, it's, it came out with a lot of fanfare and, Google Glass and all this other stuff, and like I use AR apps on my phone and just like that. I don't know. Yeah. Do you plan on using AR to some degree in your
Absolutely. And like, long story short, because I do think that this is a great launching off point for a subsequent episode.
Yeah, we have to do another one.
By the way, here we're talking 10-year plan stuff, right? I mean, to answer the last question, like this is really getting into 10-year stuff.
Yeah.
10 years from now, I think it'll be obvious what I'm describing to you right now. You'll be like, you heard it first. You heard it
first here.
This isn't stuff that I'm putting on the website or even so much, in investor materials, that perhaps I should definitely emphasize more.
Oh, yeah.
Is that this is how we alter the future, really. A platform like SwoopIn, I say might as well be SwoopIn, right?
Yeah.
Because I got a million ideas for how to alter the future. And so many possible destinations are better than the ones that we seem to be heading on today, which nobody seems to like.
Yeah.
We're headed towards like 5 different kinds of dystopia. But long story short, I don't believe to accomplish most of it, I don't believe any further new technology is needed. I believe that with the technology that we have today, like what I have access to, for example, as a developer,
Right.
there is so much there that people have just begun to scratch the surface of.
So you're talking about to accomplish what you want to do on your platform in 10 years, you don't need more new technology.
Yeah, I'm saying you don't even
Okay.
need like fancy wearable augmented reality tech. In
Okay,
fact, I think
okay.
a lot of that has the potential to lead us further down this rabbit hole that we're on and become a distraction.
Dystopia. Okay.
Yeah, I'm building for what we have today, and certainly thinking about how what we are going to have in the future builds on top of that. But
Right.
the foundation we're building for today is going to power an augmented reality interface because that does have an element. It has a use case.
Okay.
It has a feature space in what we're building, and it's going to be more elegant than just another tab in another app or
Right.
because other apps have done augmented reality layers to what they do, but it's been like a feature buried within
Right.
the settings. We have a way to bake it in, from the foundation up.
Well, I can tell you that, like, as a, just as a technology enthusiast, I can see platforms who are rushing to augment humanity, like in different ways. Like, not all of those platforms or technologies, like, personally, I wouldn't be involved with all of them, but there's some very interesting things out there. And there'll be platforms that are funded by billionaires, like Neuralink. Neuralink, for instance.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I want to. I don't know if it's a. I don't. I'm not completely sure if it's like a. You have to get surgery to insert it into your head or something like that. I think that's their test phase or something like that. But anyway,
I'm excited for the startups that are developing the new technology, because then by the time that we're ready to incorporate those features and we've got our core robust and people using it and loving it, that then we have these things ready made that we can integrate and just kind of drop in. I'm excited for that.
Well, they already have human brain computer interfaces that are pretty accurate. And I played around with some of those because I've taught robotics for a while, and like I actually have a human brain computer interface here at my house. I mean, it's pretty cool. But anyway, all I'm saying was that these, like you said, these technologies are here, and like stuff that I've been using is like rudimentary compared to the stuff they have now. And like, I mean, I could see SwoopIn and any of these type of technologies being integrated into there, but I don't want to get too far off topic. Anyway, another day. We need another day.
I think an hour 20, an hour and a half is a pretty good meaty introduction to.
I love it, man. So you gave us your 10-year goal, your long-term vision, all of that stuff. Please tell us where people can find you, info about you, Marco, personal profiles, profiles for your app, online, offline, whatever.
Right. So first of all, SwoopIn, the app, it can be found right here. And you type that name, one word, SwoopIn, into the App Store, and you'll see us there. You can download it, start playing around with it. And then we have the website at www.swoopin.net. If you'd like to follow us on social, we're not marketing too much there yet, but you'll start getting that marketing message, once we get there, and have Android and so forth. Maybe even a bit before that. That is at SwoopIn. That's pretty much our handle on all the major social platforms, Instagram, Twitter, and so forth. And my email, marco@swoopin.net. If you want to blast me with anything interesting, questions, ideas, feedback, that's a great place to reach me. And yeah, thanks for.
What about your Tinder group?
Yeah, well, the Tinder group has not officially been rebranded yet, and I wanted to wait. I wanted to give a bit of time to the former organizer, who I still kept as organizer in case
Okay.
And they're like, what are you doing here taking our group? Although typically the group would already not exist if I hadn't accepted
If you hadn't accepted.
offer to step up and take over the subscription fee.
Yeah, no, dude, they can't complain.
But yeah, I mean, join that group. It's not doing anything yet, but the idea is that before it starts doing something, you know, because it's a captive audience and people that are interested in location-based technologies.
Yeah.
Which we are, and I think an evolution of dating is to be more broad, because, like I said, people need a more universal foundation of friendship to really come together, and it doesn't have to be just dating.
Right.
And although that's a very powerful element of it, and we have a lot of features on the way that will kind of bring us more directly into that route too.
You gotta give us that on part 2, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Another part 2 or part 3.
Awesome. Well, Marco, I really appreciate you for coming on to the Startempire Wire podcast. This is the first. Like, man, we need a round of applause sound of effect in the background. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in as well. Marco, SwoopIn, check out his platform. If you're on iPhone, download it and be expecting Android coming sometime this year as well. 2 months, he said, but we're just gonna maybe hold his feet to the fire a little bit on that.
Do it.
And
pressure.
Yes, and also come connect with all of us at some of these local events that we're doing. Startempirewire.com is where you can hear about these events, hear about these startups. And thank you again, Marco, for coming on, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for having me, Various. This was a lot of fun. It's going to create an addiction, doing these.
I hope so. And
well, this is a good experience. Thank you.
Peace out to the audience. See you on next episode.